Learn how to unapologetically build an effective team to commercialize a new technology. How President Trevor Kloeck helps Plantae Technologies win every day. On today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Shepherd. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Gordon Shepherd. And before I get started, I just want to thank all the guests who have been on this show who are helping me on my own leadership journey. Like Kelly Mottet from episode 5, who told us about the importance of Starbucks Fridays, which is a chance to take the time every week to connect with your colleagues and not talk about work, but just get to know each other. And that is so important for a remote work team. Or Alvin Pike on episode 6, who raised $25 million to buy a company, and the biggest loan he'd ever gotten before that was the mortgage on his house. One of the key things that he said was to surround yourself with the right people when you are trying to make these deals happen. And that is a great reminder that you can't do it alone, and that having the right people on your team can make all the difference. And I know it's not just me who's winning by listening to this show, because we already have listeners from Sweden and beyond. On today's episode, you'll learn how to unapologetically build an effective team to commercialize a new technology, how President Trevor Kloeck helps Plantae Technologies to win every day. But before we get started, I just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the Executive Wins Workshop. In this high-impact workshop, executive teams learn how to reverse engineer past wins in a structured way so they can get more wins in the future. This highly interactive session is for senior leadership teams who want to improve profitability, processes, communication, and a whole lot more. I'll be your facilitator, bringing 25 plus years of experience and a proven system that you can learn to improve the overall results in your business. It's available in half-day, full-day, and customizable formats, and it's really good for team building and corporate retreats. There's also an in-depth version I call a wins audit, and this is when I interview people from all levels of a company to find out how they get their wins. And then I deliver a summary to the executive team. And because I'm not in the family, the results are real. So if you're an executive who wants to find out how people in your company get their wins, and then also get analysis about whether or not those wins are aligned with your strategy, then visit executivewins.com/workshops to learn more. And now on to today's show. We are lucky to be joined by Trevor Kloeck, the president of Plantae Technologies, an innovative company that gets the best out of plants and then applies the solutions in a wide variety of ways across multiple industries. For example, they have a hemp-based product that is used for erosion control. And if you want to learn more about their innovations, then visit plantaetech.com. That's plantaetech.com. In this episode, Trevor talks about why it is so important to build a strong team if you want your technology company to succeed. And that's because you get hugs and punches every day in terms of new discoveries, setbacks, and more. Which is why Plantae is so intentional about having a talented group of employees that have shared values and who can all get behind their mission to do something good on this planet. And before we get into it, I want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created. It's called The Anatomy of a Win, to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win you hear on this show. I hope that you can use this approach to reach your next business milestone. And now here's Trevor Kloeck with his executive win. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Pleasure being here.
You know, it's just so lucky to have you here, you know, with the experience that you're bringing to the work that you do. But a lot of people, you know, haven't met you. And so if you had to describe sort of yourself and your company and kind of the big vision that you've got for the world, please let us in on that so we can get to know you.
So we're kind of unique in the way that we actually look at nature as kind of the solution for most of our problems, right? So I think in the world today, we're taught that nature is something that's vulnerable, that needs to be protected, that's being destroyed. And that's actually not the way we see it. Nature does have a lot of issues that we need to take very seriously, but it's also our biggest asset. And so within the vision of the company and kind of what we're doing, we look at that as nature itself and natural systems is a way to solve most of our problems, right? So this kind of comes from a unique history in the company where we're kind of an odd combination of what I would call very unique, high quality engineering skills, then unique, very high quality biology skills, coupled with a real sense of business in the leadership team.
Fantastic. And it's Plantae. And how long has Plantae been in business?
We started just a few weeks before COVID hit. So our timing, I don't know if it was the best of times or the worst of times, but we were right there when it hit. So 3 weeks before COVID started in 2020 is when we incorporated the company. But regardless of that pandemic and all the disruption it caused, we started manufacturing in 2022 on a very limited scale with a brand new technology.
A brand new technology and problems that you solve. If sort of, for someone that doesn't know, you're in this genius sort of biology meets engineering solution-based technology, unique scenario. But, if I'm Joe Schmo and I need to say, well, what's a Plantae application and what problem is it solving? Maybe just give me one or two examples.
Yeah, so right now, most of our products, when we look at them in the industry, are actually being used to repair damaged soils, right? So we're used to thinking about soils in the context of a construction project or in agriculture, and we work in those types of areas as well. But when we start to think about kind of where Canada's history is, it's in mining, it's in oil and gas, it's in forestry, and we scratch and disturb the landscape on a very large scale here. So we actually targeted that as our beachhead market, right? So we developed a product line that allows us to stabilize, repair, and enhance the recovery of soils and things like pipelines, mines, oil and gas sites, etc.
Remarkable. So, I've got my old pipeline, I've got to get rid of it sort of thing. And you folks would be able to come in and help me recover that soil and get it back to, like you said at the beginning, it's almost natural state. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so it's less about an old net pipeline, but anytime that their ground is disturbed, Canada's got very strong regulations, right, in the environmental space. Canadians as a whole ought to be more proud of what we do with the environment than we are. We're too humble, sometimes for our own good. And so what we do, let's say when the Coastal GasLink pipeline is being built or the Trans Mountain pipeline is being built or other pipelines that are coming through the region, our products will be used when that soil is removed and put back to protect that soil and get it back into a healthy ecological state, right? And so what's important about that ecological state, and this is why we've got such good progressive companies here, is when they do that and we have a healthy soil back, it's actually very resistant to disruption and to other changes. It's a nice, strong system. Nature is the best protection for a damaged environment.
Remarkable. There's so much to unpack in there, including going through the genius brains and you and your company to come up with a solution that can actually do this and do this well. And I think people are going to do well to go to your website for Plantae and check it out and, learn more about it for themselves and certainly their industrial applications and that type of thing. In the meantime, the lucky part was getting to pre-interview and learn a little bit about, some of the good things that are happening in your world. And we always start this off to say, if you had to pick kind of one of your biggest wins in business in the last couple of years, what would it be? And how would you describe it?
Well, that's always such a hard question to answer. I think we're super proud of how some of our products are being used in the field, right? So, technologically, the big win for us is being able to develop the world's first soil stabilization hydraulic product with hemp fibers. It's actually very technically difficult. And it allows us to build other products in the future around packaging, composites, pulp, and consumer goods, right? Because we're talking about a very high technical threshold that we were able to master. What's interesting is that's probably not the thing I'm most proud of. I'm actually most proud of the team that we assembled, right? So we often make mistakes in the business world of thinking that technologies make businesses or markets make businesses, people that make businesses, right? So very deliberately, very cautiously, we tried to build a team that allowed us to actually do big things with good ideas. So it's not just about being smart. It's about kind of a culture we've established within the company.
You've given me a fork in the road here, and I'm just going to follow one of those strands because I'm really interested in soil stabilization and cool, chem engineering and all the things that you've done there. But I'm going to pick up on your people part because you can hear that's where your pride is in terms of what we can talk about here today. It's just so significant that you would sort of clue in on that because I've actually heard on this show other technology CEOs talk about that very thing. They've got a cool thing they've created, and it takes a lot of work to get there. In the meantime, they've really talked about this team building components. So when we get into this now, I always like to introduce what I call the anatomy of a win to learn a little bit more in depth about, the win that you're talking about. When we talk about being proud of your people and what it took to kind of get here at this moment, what is the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results? We'll get into it behind, making that a priority. So you got this company, you started up just before COVID. Was it in the strategy right away, for example, or did it emerge in the strategy, in terms of the vision, the mission, kind of the goals you had for the company? Did it emerge to have good people? Did you have it from the get-go, or did it kind of grow with you?
Yeah, we right from the get-go, I think it was probably, I'd say, one of the central principles of the company, right? We knew we had a technology and a pathway to market that was actually very viable. But, my partners and I have all been in this business a long time. We've seen many companies come and go. We've seen companies fail. And one of the reasons that they often fail is all around people, right? So I would say that it was probably central. So we consider ourselves a community, so that the value right from the staff that are operating as operators on the plant, to our engineering staff, to the people in our front office, they all embrace that culture, right? And so the most important thing about that is actually the vision. Like, the intent with the company is obviously to be very profitable. That's critical. But the mission is to do something good on this planet, right? So for us to keep these staff and to keep everybody together, it's important that everybody's bought into the why, right? And what's can't be stated enough is innovation's really hard. You've heard me talk about that before. And if they're not bought into the journey and the hugs that you get sometimes and the punches you get, the steps forward, the steps back, you're not going to make it, right? So it's all about getting people to buy into a bigger vision, because it's going to get hard at times.
Interesting, because you could go through, I'm going to say, whatever, lose a contract, an experiment goes wrong, whatever these sort of, peaks and valleys that you're talking about along the way. So you have to really invest in getting them to buy into the vision. Who's the cheerleader in this situation? Is it you? Is it the whole team? Like, how does that sort of get carried forward?
Right now, what's really cool about it, and which is why I say I'm so proud of the whole group, is it's everybody, right? So I think at times, obviously from a senior management group, there's about 4 or 5 of us that are in the plant regularly, that act as, we'll call it, that vision board, that leader that kind of gets everybody charged up. But once you got a team charged up, they do it themselves, right? Doesn't mean you're not going to have wrinkles along the way, but they're going to be the ones that charge. And to give you some examples, we've had some major innovations even on the polymer side that we didn't even know were coming, just because the staff we had were so passionate about what they did. They took it on themselves to actually learn about what was happening.
Isn't that remarkable? So they're a motivated group. You've got that sort of dialed in, and we'll get into some of the details about why they're so motivated. Something I picked up on, I got a chance to look over your website. You've got some non-negotiable values that you're putting out in the world. Are you familiar with them? And maybe you can reflect on, there was 4 solid ones there, but do you know them? Can you let us know kind of the gist of them and why they're so important?
Yeah, so the values of the company is that we're really centered around being unapologetically sustainable, right? We're unapologetically honest, right? And we're going to do the right things for the customer and for the planet, right? In the media, and quite justifiably, there's lots of conversations about greenwashing, right? And so coming back from my professional background, we've always seen that as something that's not really necessary. So if you're really building back from natural principles, then you're honest about them, you can actually achieve some really cool commercial and technological innovations, but you can't deviate. And it's very easy to deviate from those things. And part of the reason why that central mission around being unapologetically honest and unapologetically sustainable are so critical is everybody needs to be on mission all the time. And they need to have permission to say no. And it's a great way for us to be able to filter things out of the business, right? In terms of product opportunities that we shouldn't be following, or getting distracted by a customer requirement that really isn't quite on brand. And it's been a big part of our growth strategy, right? Because it kind of keeps you focused on what you're good at. And it's not spurious in the sense that everybody talks about green and the greenwashing thing. We actually mean it, right? And so we have to be able to defend that in every step that we're doing through the business.
I love the word unapologetic. I mean, it's one thing to say we are, whatever, we're going to sustain the planet. And that's, by the way, often in those big, when you look at multinationals, that'll get in there. Unapologetic speaks to, again, the crew and the care that you've put into developing this scenario. And isn't that interesting that there's economic payoffs? If we're going down a rabbit hole the wrong way, we know people can say no. That's tough to get throughout a culture. Like how many employees, how many people all in for your company?
Just under 20 right now with the group.
So you got 20 people and they've all adapted that attitude. So onboarding would be no problem because you would either get somebody out of there quickly who didn't go along with this, or once they're bought in very quickly. Shiny object syndrome is not a problem because you know these values are super strong and you can keep that going. Wow, what a remarkable base. You had it from the get-go. It reflects the founders in terms of what you're doing. It's what you're most proud of, and we're in the middle of building out. You've got the values, you've got the vision in your strategy, the goals obviously clear around being very profitable, but also then allowing you to pull off these values by being profitable at the same time. Well, you must sleep well at night because it must be so fun to go to work. And it gets me on to step number 2. If we have a strategy, we have to have a practical part. I'll call it the work plan. This is the what, who, and the when to actually pull this off. So if we're going to have great people, what are some of the highlights of the work plan to make that work that are kind of unique to this win for you?
So I think what's really not even unique about our approach is we really try and keep things compartmentalized, right? So the staff specialize in what they do. They have some ownership in what they do, and they're part of a team. So everybody, there's no hierarchy per se in the company other than the fact that everybody's part of it. So in terms of that work plan, it really kind of comes down to that mission on 2 levels. And one of them, which is really critical because we're a tech company. The first is make this product work the most efficient way possible, right? The second part of the work plan that is kind of unique to a novel tech company like us is embrace the fact that every time you turn on a machine, you're innovating, right? And this is where it's always been a bit of we'll call it a fuzzy path when you're in a business like this, because the process that we use at our manufacturing facility is the first of its kind anywhere. So talking about those ups and downs that we have in the business, every single day represents a deviation from plan, right? So the mission is around what that product needs to look like and how do we learn while we're making that product so that the next innovation happens and productivity goes up, et cetera, et cetera. So there's we'll call it a continuous improvement that becomes completely part of the culture.
Continuous improvement all the time, in a sense, right? So in the meantime, if you didn't have that central set of values and shared vision, you might be way off the rails from what you've described, especially because I'm going to say first to market or first with your technology and how many deviations that could take. Plus, when you've got genius folks around, it's not hard to noodle and think about all the cool things that you could be doing. But in the meantime, then that practical part, is there like a strong onboarding process for new employees that's kind of in play there when we look at that timeline of the practical part or that ongoing continuous improvement to reinforce on a day-to-day or week-to-week, month-to-month basis?
Yeah, there is. So we're very careful in terms of how we hire and develop people, right? So it's not just about them having the intelligence or the work ethic or the work experience to come into the job. It's about them having the right attitude, right? So we're very selective about that. And we've actually used our networks in novel ways. So one of my partners is actually the sessional instructor at the University of Alberta, right? So he's been very effective in identifying some just brilliant young people that are passionate, want to do good things, and most importantly, want to learn, than actually pulling them through the system that way. So what we try and do very informally is keep a very wide funnel so that we're identifying people that match our values and our culture, that even if they're not part of our journey right now, could be a part of our journey in the future.
Love it. So that timeline, you've got a very conscious recruiting kind of process for that said wide funnel in a sense. You've got sort of maybe a primary source of not talent, not the only source of talent, but you've got a way to plug into university level people where you're going to maybe match up those values quicker along the way. And then we could, if we had time and I was in a full day workshop with you right now, I would take you through all those steps along the way of really interesting little moments. And I'll bet you there's all kinds of little coaching moments, reinforcement moments that happen along that very practical part of the way. The third step, so we just talked about the strategy and a work plan to pull off the strategy. You need people to pull off a win. And funny enough, we're talking about people when we look at sort of what it is. So to build this workforce, which you're so proud of, who are the key players? And what are their roles, and how would you describe their attitudes in the situation? And maybe we'll start with sort of you and the senior leadership team in a sense to say, start there, and then we can fan out to explore kind of the stakeholder group in a sense.
Yeah, so the leadership group, quite deliberately, and this comes back to how Plantae was founded, was built on two pillars, right? So the first was a really strong and very unique technical background, which is composed of myself and my business partner, Wade Shute. And then beside us and working with us, we have an extremely strong business team, right? That all had executive experience, both on a multinational level and national level with major companies that can actually guide and coach us through this innovation path, right? So part of that people plan is to bring all the pieces and elements together for a business. Let's have a good idea. Let's have good technology, right? And then let's have people that actually know how to put these pieces together. And with the tech company, where that's really critical, is the herding cats thing with science is a real deal, right? So you hear people talk about that all the time, and it's a constant threat, especially when you're dealing with something novel. So you need to have a team right off the bat at the executive level that sets the tone, right? And then from there, you're able to kind of train, develop, and manage people based on their aptitudes and passions below that from a management standpoint.
Love it. So you've got these sort of things in place already at the executive team. Again, you're backing up your technology and putting together either formal direct line or informal advisory in a sense to know that you're going to be successful. So you've got that part of your business taken care of. There's something about management training in here. There's something about humility or intentionality that's, you know, in the attitude of the senior leadership along with the other people. Like, does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. And there's two things there, right? Like, we have to get people, there's accountability that everybody needs to have, right? In order to operate a business. We're not just a tech company, we're manufacturing products, right? But there's also the whole process of actually getting people to take ownership of every step, right? And so part of the training process and then part of the development process is making sure that people get that, right? But that they also own that and they're doing it on their own, right? So we have safety meetings, for example, regularly, and it's a measure of success for the management team that staff are identifying, you know, things on their own and ways to improve, right? It's not about safety as much as it is that conversation about everybody saying, how do we make this company better, right? And that's just a microcosm, because if they're doing that they're doing that in everything. How do we make this process better? How do we make this more efficient, right? And then we can learn through those things. And with a young company like us, there's a ton of stuff to learn. This is not a straight line, right? This is a very zigzaggy line. And these staff need to be embodied into that so like they all have a voice. Because they'll see things sometimes that we don't, right? Just because they're doing it. And it can be coming down to something as simple as just even how you shovel a new product into a machine could influence the final product. And so if we don't have staff that are saying, look, I noticed this, right? We can make it process improvements down the line when we're really running at scale.
That is just remarkable. And what a C-suite dream in a sense, but you don't snap your fingers and that happens, right? That's a layering process right from the get-go, like you said, that you've been doing year in, year out, meeting in, meeting out to get those things to occur, to allow that ownership at every step to occur. And you can hear again, that's a clear line that if we drew a line to your values around the unapologetic, it's all kind of coming together. This is almost a business case study that we're seeing for best practice as we go along the way. What a pleasure to be jumping into step number 4. So we talked about, again, the strategy, the work plan, and the people. The 4th step I love to explore here is operationally. If you're going to have a great staff, you've got to have something operationally in place to kind of get that done. It could be around policies and procedures. It can be around giving them the right tools to do their jobs. It could be, those types of things. Any highlights in that area that allow your workforce to be as strong as it is?
Well, what's interesting is that's been part of the growth process for us, right? So the interesting thing about the system is because it's new, and this is one of the coaching moments for the staff where we've really had to keep them motivated and engaged, is we didn't start the plant with policies and procedures because this was the first time it had ever happened, right? And so you don't know what your policy and procedure is until you start. And you got to start with intelligence, and you've got to start with intent, and you've got to start with the end goal in mind quite clearly, right? So what's interesting about the policies and procedures is their evolution as much as anything, especially in a company like this, right? It's what's been exciting and incredibly time consuming is this is a different journey than opening up a coffee shop, right? We don't have a roadmap. We're building the roadmap, right? There's obviously other manufacturers out there, but we're dealing with a novel natural material, right? We're dealing with a novel manufacturing process. We're dealing with the first of its type applications in the field, right? So it's every single step in terms of policies and procedures is a learning experience. And so I would say it's less about having them than always making them and continuing to improve them. And as we grow this company and we start to learn more about what the capabilities are and more products and opportunities come on there, this becomes part of the culture and the process for the entire business, right?
Isn't that remarkable? And so again, almost like the way you're scaling your revenues, you're scaling your workforce, this sort of operational component about getting tools, policies, things in place is scaling along with you in a sense. Boy, years ago, I was consulting with a client in a long project, and one of the junior HR people had brought in a generic employee handbook that was essentially useless. Because they had to go, like it needed all this customized work based on the nature of that operation. And in the meantime, the senior leader had a disconnect there and thought, oh, they had that covered. And then when we went in and found out that it was generic and not applicable in this case to the Alberta jurisdictional laws and, all the labor standards and all that kind of stuff, it was just like, it was a big eye opener. And thankfully we were able to get that remedied. But in your case, because you're dealing with multiple jurisdictions, you've got your own internal things, there's the safety part, like there's so many things that are going along, and yet you have a pioneering spirit in the tone of your voice. This does not sound overly daunting for you. It sounds like something that you're sort of grappling with along as you grow. Is that fair?
Yeah, you have to, right? It's the only way that's going to happen, right? And so if you think about the kind of company that we model ourselves after, it's companies like Amazon that started with a very small, humble vision, in very confined settings, doing something that nobody thought was important, right? And so Amazon did not have a roadmap to build the company that they are. Nobody done it before, right? There was maybe similar pieces out there, and there was technology pieces out there, but the assembly and the culture and all those things that happened afterwards, they had to build on their own. And they too, when you talk to companies like that, are constantly figuring out how they're going to go forward, right?
Interesting. And so this getting the right people with the right attitude being an essential ingredient, which you've just demonstrated along the whole conversation, has been essential to that, including knowing that you're going to be growing and scaling and adapting essentially all along the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have no chance in the innovation game if you don't have the right culture internally.
Fantastic. I mean, what's so good is we're kind of breezing through these, but it's we talked about the strategy, the work plan, the people operations. The final thing is, you said you're super proud of the win of having a great work staff and culture. How do you measure the results? Do you measure it in profitability? Do you measure it in hours? I don't know, no time lost? Like, what are the measurements, data in a sense, that you collect? And it could be qualitative as well to know that you're being successful to get this win.
Yeah, I'd say it's both quantitative and qualitative. It's actually measured in the improvements in the products and the processes themselves, right? So because we're so new and we're so young, it's less about the profit and more about getting to a model that's disruptive, right? So every single day when those guys go in there, turn on a plant, or the sales team goes out there, something new's happening, right? So I want them to actually be measured on that, and they are. So what'll happen is, let's say we have a little challenge with the product. We're off spec for what we thought we were going to do. The measure for us is the initiative and the effort in there to remedy that as fast as possible, right? Because if those pieces and that culture isn't in place, the profitability is never going to come, right? Producing huge quantities of product that nobody wants to buy or buys once and then hates you is not a success measure. So you can be wildly profitable in the short term and then still blow up as a company because you're not tracking the right metrics, right? So the metrics for us are all around, are they actually producing a quality product? Are they engaged in producing a quality product? Are they getting productivity up in the plant? And are we developing new technologies creatively on all levels every single day, right?
Isn't that funny? So you didn't say dollars, number one, because you understand where you are at in your stage of growth, because you know the dollars will come.
Yeah.
But you're sort of being patient with that. But what you are able to measure is quality, productivity to a certain degree. How would you just say the general spirit is on the floor in a sense? Is there something there that sort of is a mood indicator? You know what I mean? You don't manage by walking around. Do you get a sense of that? Is there that type of indicator as well?
Yeah, it's we like to hear laughter out there, right? So if we want them to enjoy being around each other. The management team needs to enjoy being around each other, and they need to be engaged in discussions about what they're doing. And that's at all levels. It's not just the engineering staff, it's the operational staff, it's the maintenance staff. Everybody needs to be engaged. So when we're looking at that process out there, that sense of purpose needs to be there at all times, or we're in trouble. And where it's not a non-negotiable for a company like us, and this is something that's often missed, is that talking about innovation is really easy. Wanting innovation is really easy. Doing innovation is really hard, right? Because you have to fight for every customer because you're doing something new and it's never been done before, right? And you turn on a machine, even if you did it on a smaller scale, it doesn't mean they're going to spit it out, right? So every time that you're going to do something, you're going to have a step forward and a step back, right? You'll lose a bearing on a piece of machinery because it's the first time it's been set up that way, right? So if you don't have that central passion and these guys engaged in what they're doing, right, you'll never get through it, because there'll be days where they'll get to the plant and every single thing seems to go wrong, right?
I love your experience. So I'm hearing that talking about innovation's fun, doing innovation is hard. My biggest theme that I'll take out of this whole conversation, I just can't thank you enough for your time. So many leaders, I think, are going to hear the details of what you talked about and get a lot from that. But also, I think it's the tone of your voice. I just think unapologetic is right in there. And I can hear that you've earned that right, because we're talking about now, what, 5-6 years of whatever, baking it, doing it, and then you're in the day in and the day out. So I really appreciate the confidence that you bring to your answers as well. Any sort of closing thoughts on this win that you got, and anything to kind of put a bow on it?
Yeah, it's been as hard as it's been to build a company through COVID, right, and all this uncertainty. It's still been a lot of fun. And the one thing that kind of really keeps us motivated, and it sounds aloof to say because everybody talks about this from a green standpoint, but we know we're right. We know we're right about the products that we're making. We know we're right about the direction of the market, where it's going. And we know that there's going to be hugs and punches along the way, right? So for us as a company, knowing that we're on mission to something that matters, that solves real problems, and that can be profitable is absolutely critical, right? And so every time we get out there, and we'll often have kind of like circle back meetings as a management team and with the staff, is this matters, right? It's not just about the profitability of the business, because we all want that. That's a given. It's about, does it matter that you're here? Is this something you're going to live with at the end of the day and you're going to be proud of, right? And that's how we get really excited about this. We know we're right, but if you don't take those steps within that innovation culture to get there, it doesn't matter how right you are, right? We've seen that over and over again in the world.
We know we're right, unapologetic, living it day in and day out. Trevor, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here.
Be unapologetically sustainable and honest. Now that is how Trevor and his leadership team have helped to build a strong culture that will make their technology company succeed. Thanks so much, Trevor, for sharing your well-earned win. Now, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our other episodes, which include how to build a successful business development program so you can win new clients. And that's with CEO Kelly Kennedy from Capital Business Development. And if you and your leadership team want to learn the anatomy of a win so you can reverse engineer your past wins in a structured way to get more business wins in the future, then check out our workshops at executivewins.com/workshops to learn more. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.